So I start this one with something we've already looked at, and that's this promotional brochure of Lake Quinault and the Quinault Rainforest. And I bring it up here again because, well, what do you think? Why, why am I bringing this up? So we have some amazing trees here in the Pacific Northwest, and probably more than any other single thing. If you ask people outside the Pacific Northwest what they think of when they think of it, they'll tell you forests, and some of them will say and really big trees. And they probably won't mention the dry summers and the wet winters. And maybe you're tired of hearing about that too. But in fact, that's still part of the story, and we're going to come to that. But what I'm about ready to present to you is really just amazing stuff, and it kind of is all in this ilk of bigger, larger, more amazing, more productive, and so on. So, you know, think about the size of a tree that has this largest western red cedar in the world, 63 feet in circumference. I mean that is just amazing. The Sitka spruce, almost that much circumference as well. Uh, the Douglas fir there, 302 feet tall. Okay, there were Sitkas that were pushing that as well. By the way, I think most of those, all those have been cut down. Um, and then the western hemlock, which isn't thought of as that big of a tree, but that's no small tree either, is it? So, really, really amazingly big trees. But with that in mind, let's go to the notes on this. This is a set of notes that helps us sort of get a picture of how our Northwest forest, Pacific Northwest forests, really do not have any equal on Earth. Our temperate rainforests, as sometimes they're called, as opposed to say tropical rainforests, um, biomass. If you just add up the trunk, branches, and foliage of a mature forest in the region, you get somewhere between 330 and 790 tons per acre. Now, an acre is about the size of a football field, ballpark, just to give you a sense. That's a lot of biomass, isn't it? In fact, you know that Sitka spruce forest I showed you that has a trail walk kind of going through it there, the one of the slides. It's probably in that ballpark. Kind of amazing. This number compares with less than 300 tons per acre in the tropical rainforests and other mid-latitude forests, like the ones in New England. Like if you ever saw the movie Last of the Mohicans, that would be that mid-latitude kind of temperate forest with a greater share of trees that are deciduous trees that have broadleaves, like maples, for example. So the biomass is the first thing, amazing. The second is, well, coniferous trees are more numerous. Now, this is actually a very low number of total species. I mean, if you go to a tropical rainforest, which is compared in number one to tropical rainforest, but this is a very low number of species for either one, but only 12 hardwood uh, native species, 25 of coniferous. Now, remember, conifers or conifer species are needle leaf, they have cones, the seeds are in the cones. Hardwoods lose their leaves, almost all of them, in the winter, and they're not needle leaf. They have more of a larger, wider leaf, and so the alder would be one that we didn't really talk about big leaf maples yet. We're going to get to that in a later unit, but probably. But so more they're more numerous. Now here's an amazing thing. They have more species, but that's only about double. But they have about, this is a fairly decent estimate. I saw some of the background on this, although it smacks of rounding numbers, doesn't it? I always am suspicious when I see 1,000 or 100 times, but this is just a ballpark thing, so keep that in mind. But about 1,000 times the abundance and biomass of the hardwoods. That's a big difference. Every genus of conifer here is the largest of its kind on the planet. Yeah, the tallest spruce, the tallest cedar, the tallest hemlock, the tallest pine, the tallest true fir, the Douglas fir is also an enormous species, the world's third tallest tree, even though it's not a true fir. It's its own genus. By the way, there's some in China, and there's also in that genus in actually in Mexico, interestingly. Um, Coastal redwoods. Okay, so these are giant trees. Okay, among the tallest trees in the world. Here we are, Pacific Northwest. All right. Now, so that's descriptive. That's the kind of stuff that even you can get the attention of an elementary school. Well, actually, elementary school kids, it's pretty easy to get their attention. It's those high schoolers that are tough, right? Some of you are going to be teachers someday. I think you kind of know what I'm getting at. Usually about middle schools, wherein a lot of that curiosity kind of gets pounded into the dust, and that's too bad. But I share this first stuff with you just because it's amazing. I mean, if you don't find that amazing, well, I can't amaze you. I'm not very amazing myself, but the trees are. So that said, um, I'm interested even more though in this question of conifers being dominant in our Northwest forest, but not in the other North temperate forests. Why is that? Okay, whether you go to Chile and South America and temperate latitudes, or Europe and so on, why are coniferous trees so dominant here? And interestingly, by the way, you can take a Douglas fir and plant it in the United Kingdom, and it will, Great Britain area, and in other parts of Europe, Northern Europe, and it's not as likely as it is here to dominate in stands over time. So what is it about here? Okay, some background. If you look at the temperature of planet Earth, this is a little time scale. We'll kind of go back and forth on this. But this is thousands of years before present here, and then the scale changes, okay? And the scale keeps changing. You have to be aware of that. It's kind of hard to show this many million years when you want to show fine gradations over in the right in our recent times. But this is a context, a kind of geohistoric climatological piece here that we need to be aware of, okay? Where basically there was a colder period, but really going farther back, a much warmer period as well. So let's have a peek back at our notes then. About 30 million years ago, hardwoods dominated the Pacific Rim from California to Siberia and Japan. Conifers were small, stunted, and restricted to more stressful conditions at higher elevations. So again, going back to that, so 30 million years ago, we're talking about here. And that's when it was a little warmer than it is now, if you kind of look at this line here, okay? And it had been quite a bit warmer leading up to that time period as well. It's kind of an interesting place to start the story. So by 10 million years ago, and by the way, there's been lots of detailed studies on this. I don't have time to get into evidence here, but I do have some of the evidence available in the scientific articles that I cite at the end, and that's a good start for you if you're interested in that. And if you're interested in more of that, I can give you some more literature or put you on to how to find it. So by 10 million years ago, the Cascade and Coast Ranges had arisen, promoting a wetter, cooler climate on the west slopes, and also a protection on the west side from cold continental air masses. So we didn't just have the Rockies, but by then we also had the Cascades and we had the Coast Ranges. So that meant that the west side here, whether it's Willamette Valley, Puget Sound, or the actual coast or the coast hills, were pretty protected from really bitterly cold winters. But by the same token, by building mountains in the way of westerly flow, those fall, winter, and early spring rainy periods that we get, and then as I write this, that we're getting right now, or as I do this YouTube video here in October, we have a wetter than ever west slope. Okay. By 2.5 million years ago, many of the hardwoods that used to be dominant, remember hardwoods are broadleaf deciduous trees, okay, not the coniferous trees. Many hardwoods had gone extinct. Others had shrank into specialized habitats as conifers spread down to the lowlands. So what gives? Okay, so there's a change. We had largely a hardwood forest around, and we went from a hardwood to mostly coniferous. What is going on here? By 1.5 million, in fact, the Pacific Northwest forests had become overwhelmingly coniferous. Why? Okay. And now you're going to begin to understand maybe a little more why I made such a big deal about wet, mild winters being near the Pacific and dry summers. Kind of unusual in the world, right? Kind of Mediterranean, but really the Mediterranean, a little tiny slice of Chile and a little tiny slice of South Africa. The only places in the world where you get largely a very wet winter and a very dry summer over a large territory. Usually the dry time of year in most other climates, either there isn't one or it tends to be a little bit more in the winter, like it is in the United States in the eastern part, especially southeastern part, or in the tropics, anywhere pretty much in the tropics. So why is it that the forests here have become overwhelmingly coniferous when they hadn't been before? Okay, the coincidence of two factors for the first time made coniferous dominance possible. First off, we end up with these mild winter temperatures. Remember, we built the Cascades in the way of those cold air masses, and the Rockies that were still there as well. So we had, and plus even the coast hills, if you're talking about for the immediate coastal region. So we had a marine moderation of winter, allows the soil to remain unfrozen throughout the winter. Thus, photosynthesis is possible throughout the winter. And coniferous trees take advantage of this while deciduous trees don't. Get this, and this surprises almost everybody when they learn this because it just doesn't fit the way we thought we understood the world. Half of annual net carbon assimilation from photosynthesis by Douglas fir, for example, occurs between October and May. So in other words, if you just take from about now all the way through April, as we hit May, half of all of the photosynthesis, which is basically assimilating carbon from carbon dioxide, okay? C6H12O6, basically carbohydrates in various forms, half of that is assimilated in this time of year, in the winter, late fall, winter, and the early spring. Okay, it doesn't mean that, I want to make sure I understand something. It doesn't mean that the trees are necessarily growing, but they're fixing that high energy, the high energy carbohydrates, storing them in various places, including their roots, getting ready to really grow, make hay when it gets warmer, okay? Deciduous trees, the maples, the alders, for example, which are so common in our area, the oaks, they can't do that. The coniferous trees can't, okay? The crown shape of conifers, related to that, allows for maximum absorption of oblique winter light. The bowl shape of deciduous trees doesn't. Let me imagine it this way. Look off to the right here. I'm going to just draw. Okay, this is a coniferous tree. See the shape? Okay. Now, thinking of that shape, like that, and imagining in the winter the sun is coming in at the highest at an angle about like this. Okay, that's a perfect shape to absorb the solar radiation. But the bowl shape of your alder tree or your maple tree doesn't have that nice surface area exposure to that low sun angle in the same way, does it? And so it's at a disadvantage. The needles help maximize nutrient uptake in winter as they're able to dry off faster because they have such large surface area, and they thus maximize transpiration. Okay, so that's basically sort of like the evaporation that's happening when the plants are giving off, losing their water when they're conducting photosynthesis as a product of photosynthesis. So the greater surface area of conifers at about 15 acres per acre as opposed to deciduous with 6 acres per acre. In other words, if you add up all the needle leaf surface area, it's 15 times the surface area of the ground that it covers. Truly amazing.